Margaret hadn't touched Daniel's belongings in 2 years. Not because she had forgotten him, but because every object still felt alive. His old leather watch still rested on the dresser, frozen at the time it had stopped the day paramedics rushed him out of the house. His flannel jacket still hung beside the back door, faintly carrying the scent of cedarwood and aftershave. The garage still felt like him. Organized chaos, labeled jars of screws. Fishing rods carefully leaned in the corner. Jason and Claire had moved in 6 months after the funeral. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom," Jason had said. "Let us help you." Margaret believed him. She wanted to believe him. Grief had made her soft. The house had felt too quiet. At first, it was small changes. Claire rearranged the kitchen because it was more modern. Jason moved Daniel's recliner into the garage because it didn't match. Margaret swallowed her discomfort. She told herself it was adjustment. It was temporary. One afternoon, she returned home earlier than expected from church. The sky was gray, heavy with an approaching storm. As she walked up the driveway, something caught her eye near the curb. 2 large black trash bags. The wind shifted one slightly, revealing a flash of brown leather. Her steps slowed. No, it couldn't be. She walked closer, heart thudding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The bag had torn slightly. Through the plastic, she saw the unmistakable outline of Daniel's tool belt. Her hands trembled as she pulled the bag open. His medals. The framed photo from their 40th anniversary, the fishing hat he wore every summer. A wooden box she recognized immediately, the one filled with letters he had written to her decades ago. Thrown away, like they meant nothing, like he meant nothing. The world around her felt distant. The sound of children playing down the street faded. A car passed, but she barely noticed. She felt as if she were standing outside her own body. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She carried the bags back inside, one by one. Each step felt heavier than the last. She placed them in the hallway quietly, almost gently, as if apologizing to the objects themselves. Inside, she could hear laughter from the living room. Jason's voice. Claire's voice. The television was on. Margaret stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, steadying herself. At dinner that night, she served the roast without saying much. Her grandchildren chatted about school. Claire scrolled through her phone. Jason complained about work. Margaret finally looked up. "Did you clean the garage today?" Jason shrugged, barely looking at her. "Yeah." It was full of junk. The word hit her harder than the sight of the trash bags. Junk. "That junk," she said quietly, "was your father's." Claire sighed. "Mom, it was just taking up space. You don't need to hold on to everything forever." Margaret stared at her plate. She excused herself early. In her bedroom, she closed the door and finally let the tears fall. Not loud sobs, just silent streams down her face. She picked up Daniel's watch from the dresser and held it in her palm. "They threw you away," she whispered. But as the tears slowed, something inside her shifted. The sadness did not disappear. It hardened. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene at the curb over and over again. The casual way Jason had said junk. The impatience in Claire's voice. The assumption that her memories were disposable. She sat up slowly and walked to the closet. From a small locked box on the top shelf, she pulled out a folder. Inside was the deed to the house. Daniel had insisted years ago that everything be placed securely in her name after retirement. "Just in case," he'd said with a wink. After his passing, the paperwork had transferred fully to her. She remembered signing the final documents with trembling hands. Jason had never asked about it. He had simply assumed. Margaret ran her fingers over the paper now. The house was hers. Entirely. She thought about the last 6 months. The way Claire had started calling it our place. The way Jason had begun making renovation plans without consulting her. The way they had slowly treated her like a guest who should be grateful. The trash bags were not just about belongings. They were about erasing Daniel. And erasing her. The next morning, Margaret dressed carefully and drove downtown. Her hands were steady on the steering wheel. She walked into a small law office and requested a consultation. When the lawyer asked how he could help, she spoke calmly. "I want to know my rights as the sole owner of my home." The lawyer reviewed the documents. He nodded. "You have full authority," he said. "If they are not on the deed, you can legally require them to leave." The words felt heavy and freeing. Margaret didn't rush home in anger. She stopped at a cafe instead. She sat by the window, sipping tea, thinking. She wasn't a cruel woman. She loved her son. She adored her grandchildren. But love without respect was not love at all. When she returned home, she began quietly documenting everything. She took photographs of the discarded belongings. She wrote down the date. She recorded the conversation from memory. She waited for the right moment. Sunday dinner came 3 days later. The whole family sat around the table, unaware of what was about to unfold. Margaret placed a folder in front of her. "I have something important to discuss." Jason rolled his eyes lightly. "What is it, Mom?" She opened the folder and slid a copy of the deed across the table. "This house belongs to me." "Completely." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Margaret said steadily, "that I am the sole owner. You are not on this deed." Silence spread slowly, like a crack through glass. Jason picked up the paper, scanning it. His face changed. "That doesn't matter," he said quickly. "We live here." "Yes," Margaret replied. "At my invitation." Claire crossed her arms. "Why are you bringing this up?" Margaret's voice did not shake. "You threw away your father's belongings without asking me." "It was clutter," Claire snapped. "It was my husband," Margaret answered. The room felt smaller. The grandchildren looked confused. Margaret took a breath. "You have 30 days to leave." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Jason stood abruptly. "You can't be serious." "I am." "After everything we've done for you?" Margaret met his gaze. "Respecting my home was not too much to ask." Claire's voice rose. "People will think you're heartless." Margaret closed the folder calmly. "I would rather be heartless than erased." The grandchildren began to cry softly. Jason looked at her as if seeing a stranger. "You're choosing memories over family," he said bitterly. Margaret's eyes softened, but her resolve did not. "No," she said quietly. "I'm choosing dignity." The next weeks were tense. Jason tried to argue that she was overreacting. Claire accused her of tearing the family apart. Neighbors noticed the change in atmosphere. Margaret remained steady. She installed security cameras. She changed the garage locks. She stopped cooking for everyone. She began spending her mornings gardening again, something she had given up when Claire said the yard looked dated. One evening, her granddaughter Emily knocked on her bedroom door. "Grandma?" Margaret opened it. "I'm sorry about Grandpa's things," Emily whispered. "Mom shouldn't have done that." Margaret pulled her into a hug. "Thank you," she said softly. Not everyone had forgotten. The eviction notice was delivered formally by the sheriff 2 weeks before the deadline. Jason looked stunned holding the paper. "You actually filed it," he muttered. "Yes," Margaret said. "You're really going through with this?" "Yes." The final day arrived quietly. Boxes lined the hallway. The moving truck sat in the driveway. Claire avoided eye contact. Jason looked exhausted. Margaret stood by the window as furniture was carried out. When Jason finally approached her, there was anger in his voice, but also something else: disbelief. "You're pushing us out over old stuff." Margaret looked at him. "I'm pushing you out because you forgot this was my home." He didn't respond. The front door closed behind them. Silence filled the house. It was not empty silence. It was peaceful. Margaret walked slowly into the garage. She cleaned Daniel's workbench carefully. She placed his hat back on its hook. She set his medals inside a display case. She brought the recliner back into the living room. That evening, she made tea and sat down in it. The house felt like hers again, and for the first time in 2 years, she smiled, not because she had won, but because she had remembered who she was.